There are 339 books in the Rory Gilmore Reading Challenge, and I'm going to read all of them, and I mean every single last one of them. The Reading Challenge includes all of the books that Rory Gilmore read or talked about during the run of the highly popular mid-2000s TV series Gilmore Girls. Now, to put an additional spin on the challenge, I'm going to read the books in random order, so stay until the end of the video where we spin the wheel to find out what our next book in the challenge is going to be. Hi guys, so today we have book 7 in the challenge, which is The Electric Kool-Aid Acid Test by Tom Wolfe. This is a non-fiction book from the late 60s. This is the story of author Ken Kesey and his followers during the search and exploring of themselves during a time where the hippie subculture was on a rising. Now, the very interesting thing about this book is that it connects to at least 2 other books in the challenge, one of which we've read already, which is One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest by Ken Kesey. So this book now that we are talking about today talks about the story of author Ken Kesey and what he did in between writing, I guess, whereas One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest is a novel written by Ken Kesey. So that's very interesting. And then the other book that is kind of connected to this one is On the Road by Jack Kerouac. So there is this character in this book which is called Neil Cassidy, and Neil Cassidy is later on the driver of the bus that the hippies go on a trip. And Neil Cassidy was apparently also the inspiration for Jack Kerouac's On the Road, which was written a few years before this one. This means that this book is at least connected to 2 others in the Rory Gilmore Challenge, and I'm quite interested and looking forward to see if there's any other books that connect into this sort of subgenre of the books that we are having here. As always, also please do let me know if any of you guys know where this book shows up in Gilmore Girls. I could imagine that it might be somewhere when she dropped out of university, when she dropped out of Yale, that she got into these books. Although we have to be aware a little bit, and I was thinking about that recently actually. Not all of these books are probably selected to be reflecting Rory Gilmore's character and what she would be reading. I would assume that at least part of the books made it into the show because, some production or set designer or another cast member just loved the book quite a lot, and then they were able to kind of sneak it in as one of Rory's books. So the book is told from the point of view of author Tom Wolfe, and apparently he has been following this group of Ken Keseys for a number of weeks, so he is able to tell at least partially from his own experience, and I guess the other information he got through his connections with that kind of group. What is interesting is that we don't learn a lot about author Tom Wolfe himself, so he is just kind of observing what is going on and is not really talking a lot about himself and his own experiences, which goes a little bit into the very special and unusual writing style of this book, which I'm going to talk about in a minute. But it has the additional effect that it keeps the writer, the anonymous writer, because he's not named in the book, it keeps him a little bit mysterious, I guess. So he is basically telling the story of famous author Ken Kesey, what he is doing in between writing and how he is growing this subculture of hippies and group of hippies coming together, and how they are exploring themselves, how they are exploring life, and a lot of this they are doing through the help of drugs, LSD mostly. So what Kesey does in the late 60s is basically surround himself with this group of very unusual people, all on the search for themselves and what they should be in life. And he is almost, trying to build this religious hippie cult around himself, where he is like the focal point of the group, and he almost acts like a kind of a god in this religious cult that he is building up on the foundation of hippie and on the foundation of drugs. And in the beginning of the book, he is building this little group near his home somewhere in the woods in California. They also get themselves a nickname for the group, which is Merry Pranksters, which I found quite funny. And then over time, also because he has to travel back and forth to New York because of, I believe one is a premiere for a theater of his book, One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. And then the second time is for the presentation of his new novel, basically. And then he has the idea, okay, how about we buy an old school bus and then transform it into this hippie house on wheels, basically. From then on, they are traveling the country with this bus that is, plastered with colors and paintings. And this goes quite well for a long time. So everybody is focusing on Ken. He is laying down the rules. One of the rules mainly is that there are no rules. Everybody is allowed and encouraged to do whatever he likes, no matter if it annoys anybody. But at the same time, he still is trying to keep the power. So he is really trying to position himself as this religious cult leader during that time, which does make for an interesting story. It does make for a lot of interesting connections during that time. It then, ends up going wrong, where he in the end ends up having to actually flee the country to try to get away from the justice system. Later on, a little bit later on, he then actually ends up back in the US, and he is going through this sort of legal problems. I don't want to talk too much about that, but one point that I found very interesting in there is that he ends up spending some time in a work camp as a punishment. And the funny thing there is that a few years before that, he actually wrote a book about a character in One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, of a guy that is the main character in there that is, trying to escape one of those work farms and getting into a psychiatric institution. So it kind of ends up happening to him what he thought out as a story, as a novel for a fictional character. Now, when I saw the title of the book, I was wondering, okay, what does Kool-Aid have to do with it? What does this test have to do with it? And basically what it boils down to is that whenever they do get high, whenever they do take drugs, it often happens as a mixture with this, I had to look up, it's like some sort of sweet syrup drink that I guess was very popular in the US, Kool-Aid. So they mix it together and then they drink the drugs like this. And where the test comes in is, doing this with the group, doing this with Ken Kesey's group, this is the test of your own consciousness, is the test of what really is within you and what you are able to, or how you are displaying yourself under the influence of drug, with letting go of all your fears and letting go of all your shame that you may have without being on drugs. So that's where the title, The Electric Kool-Aid Acid Test, comes from. One thing that is very special with this book is that it has a unique writing style. And apparently this book is at least one of the most famous for this unusual writing style. They call it a new journalism writing style. And what it basically is, as far as I can tell, is Tom Wolfe, he as the storyteller, he is talking about everything from his point of view, but you never learn anything about the character that is telling the story. He is just presenting the story as if he was there as well. And he is explaining the story kind of like a detective would go through a case. So he is detailed, outlining everything that is happening, and very often it almost goes into a ramble of details that he can't seem to stop himself. And what ends up happening with this style is that it also makes sentences very long. So quite often you would have a page where 2/3 of one page is just one sentence without any punctuation or anything going on. And it's very difficult to follow that kind of storytelling. That's how I felt about it. Now, what did I think about this book? I generally liked learning more about that kind of 60s hippie subculture that was going on in the US, because I never knew a lot about that. So it was very educational for me, especially since this was nonfiction. As mentioned, I did not particularly enjoy the writing style, but I guess that's a very personal opinion. What also was very difficult for me is, from the very beginning of the book, they throw in like 10 characters and they all have these very special names. And Tom Wolfe does not really do any character development. There may be, if you're lucky, there's 1 or 2 sentences on a character and then he moves on to the next one, or he even mentions like 10 new characters in one sentence. And what makes it twice as hard is that all of these people also have an additional nickname. So that was very difficult for me to get to know these people, to get to know these characters. But anyway, for me, this was 2 stars out of 5. It was okay. It was so for me. I did not enjoy it too much, but I did see the appeal of the educational part that it had for me, and I can understand how this book is or can be an absolute classic in that kind of subculture. Please let me know your comments. Did any of you guys read this book, and what is your connection between this book and One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest? Did you see any more connections in there that I might not have caught? I would love to hear about that. You all know what comes next, so we are now going to select the next book in the challenge. Okay, so we have our spinning wheel here. There are 332 books left on the wheel. Let's spin the wheel and see what we get in our next challenge. Okay, here we go. Okay, I just want a simple short novel, something easy to read. Come on. Give me something easy. Social Origins of Dictatorship and Democracy by Barrington Moore. That's not going to be a novel. That's not going to be easy. Might be a rough read, but also interesting. Let's see. I don't know Barrington Moore. But we'll see. Anyway, so this is what we are going to have for next week. I hope it's not going to be too long of a read. That might be painful, but anyway, guys, see you next time. Thank you so much for watching. Bye bye.